The Trumpet Daily is presented by Stephen Flurry. The program analyzes world news and history from a distinct perspective and compares current events to prophecies found in the Bible. The program also offers free educational publications, including the Trumpet News Magazine and books and booklets. The Trumpet Daily is produced at the Philadelphia Church of God's home campus in Edmond, Oklahoma, and its sister campus in Edstone, England. More information is available at thetrumpet.com.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
What the president has grown frustrated sometimes is that we seem to be right on the cusp of a major breakthrough in the agreement, and then all of a sudden there's a major explosion that goes off in a civilian population center in Beirut, and a lot of people who have nothing to do with Hezbollah lose their lives. That's not acceptable. That's the sort of thing that we've asked for closer coordination so that we ensure it doesn't happen. And our message to the Israelis, just as our message to everybody else, is fundamentally, we want this peace process to be good for you. You know, you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have. What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
Do I think that there are maybe, I don't know if Bibi thinks this, but do I think there are people within Israeli society who would like to turn Iran into Libya? Basically a failed state with 90 million people? Probably, but I don't know that Bibi wants that. I've actually never had that conversation with him. It'd be an interesting conversation to have. I'll tell you right now, is Iran turning into a Persian Libya good for the United States of America? Absolutely not.
The other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in. Thank you all.
There have been some pretty big turning points when it comes to U.S. foreign policy in the last 10, 15 years. Obama's JCPOA, Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Each of these signaled to the world that the United States didn't have the stomach for war, didn't have the spine, the backbone to keep up or to just fight the Taliban. And this last week is probably another turning point. It was a turning point when President Trump showed that America still had the power and will to actually confront Iran. And then just a couple months later signaled to the rest of the world, well, we don't actually have the backbone to finish the job. We want out. We want to get out of there as quickly as possible. And then there you see J.D. Vance talking to Israel pretty similarly to the way this administration has spoken to Europe over the past couple of years. For Israel, the Trump administration was sort of their last hope after dealing with Barack Obama. And now you can see that they just, you can't rely on the United States. There's this big reshuffle coming where everybody's got to figure out who their friends are. Who do they want to be in an alliance with? And of course, nobody is turning to God. Nobody's trying to get God's input. You look at the United States and the way they talk, the way J.D. Vance and Trump talk, they care far more about what Qatar, who helped sponsor Hamas and is basically the propaganda arm of Iran, they care far more about what Qatar and the UAE think than about Israel. He says it time and again. We'll play the clips. Our partners on the Gulf Coast, it's not the Persian, he just refers to them like they're just this, well, I don't even know if that's geographically right. Anyway, our Gulf partners like this deal. They like it more than Obama's. Well, does Israel like it? Did Israel get to have any say in it? Of course not. It's a betrayal. And then Israel is held accountable for ruining the deal, basically because Iran was allowed to put this caveat in there that as long as Hezbollah and Israel are fighting, this isn't going to work out. So President Trump, so desperate to have the deal, lashes out at Israel for defending itself against a terror group. And you look at, Ben Shapiro was pointing out how President Trump, J.D. Vance say, we don't want a forever war. And Shapiro said, this is what a forever war looks like. This is 50 years now of dealing with them, and another deal to extend the forever war. Not unconditional surrender, not the regime being taken down, but another deal that keeps them alive, and then an influx of cash to make sure they can continue to fund their terror proxies, to build nuclear weapons. I mean, it's humiliating watching the Trumps. Well, it's just J.D. Vance really that's out there. Marco Rubio is pretty quiet, but J.D. Vance saying, well, it's gonna take billions of dollars for them to rebuild their nuclear program, and then everybody says, well, it sounds like they're about to get $300 billion. So it seems like the money is there for them to start rebuilding this thing. As Shapiro pointed out, this is what a forever war looks like. Welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. I'm Sam Livingston. I will be your host for today's show. Looking forward to WorldWatch at the end of today's program. It's hard to believe it's already Friday. It just the weeks just fly by. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can follow us again on Rumble, YouTube. Watch us at thetrumpet.com as well, live weekdays at 11 a.m. or on demand on your favorite podcast app. Like I mentioned there, Vance's attitude towards Israel, it's pretty similar now to the way they had been speaking about Europe. Maybe even worse in some ways, the way they've come at Israel over the past few days. This is a clip this was back when it was called Signalgate, and I think it was a few of the members of the Trump administration had this signal chat, and then somehow Jeffrey Goldberg, the CEO of The Atlantic, or the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was accidentally included in this signal chat. So all of these messages get published, but probably the biggest takeaway from the messages was just how upset J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth were at Europe. And like I said, you see that same attitude towards Europe is being launched against Israel. This is clip 8.
The chat included the following exchange. The user, identified as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, posted this message referring to U.S. plans to hit Houthi forces who had disrupted international shipping in the Red Sea. It said, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again." Minutes later, according to Goldberg, the user identified as Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth responded saying this, "Vice President, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. But Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else even close."
I just hate bailing out Europe. They're freeloading. It's pathetic. And there's a point to be made there. President Trump, rightly so, called them out over the past few years. But these are also our allies. And in the case of Europe, you really want to, if you're the United States, you want as much control and influence over Europe as possible, considering recent history. But the America First agenda and the J.D. Vance agenda is, well, let the Europeans handle it. Let Israel handle it. They can figure it out for themselves. Why does the United States need to be involved over there? Again, it's short-sighted thinking. It's really thinking that's devoid of history, of any context, just recent history. But this is turning on Europe, turning on Israel, and then basically, well, our friends on the Gulf Coast love this deal. The Qataris, the UAE, we'll talk a lot about Qatar in a little bit, but you look at, Melanie Phillips has a great article just pointing out, well, why is Trump thinking the way that he is? And when you get Qatar involved and you think about, okay, well, it was the first Trump administration where they went after Qatar for funding all of these Islamists in U.S. universities. Basically an enemy nation. And Qatar, they played the long game. They built that base that they rented out. Again, they went and made a deal basically without Israel's input. Twisted Bibi's arm into doing it. He quotes Melanie Phillips in this agreement. Phillips wrote, "President Trump is dealing with the devil. You can surely say it is not of God's doing. This is a catastrophic, monumental mistake. This deal has exposed Mr. Trump's flaw in a way that none of us want to see. Something is dreadfully wrong here. What Mr. Trump has done here is going to plague him for the rest of his tenure in office. Just watch and see if it doesn't happen that way unless he dramatically changes course." It's going to plague him. You look at just how hard they're working to try and sell this deal. I mean, President Trump is stepping all over himself trying to explain it. We'll play some of the clips, but he said it with the mainstream media are saying, well, you said unconditional surrender. Is this what unconditional surrender looks like? He says, I think so. You said no ballistic missiles. Well, Iran needs to be able to have some self-defense, as if Iran is not the aggressor. And then Rubio said, every problem in the Middle East gets back to Iran. He sees the head of the snake, and you get the confrontation for a few months where they actually go after the head of the snake. But now it's back to dealing with the devil. We'll quote quite a bit from an article Melanie Phillips wrote last night titled Trump's Surrender. But look at this administration. They want so badly to please the media where they go out. J.D. Vance was joking about how he was on The View. And he's going to Megyn Kelly, who loves Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. I just want everybody on our side. We just want to show the radical left how rational we are. Because maybe then they'll come around to voting for us. Ignore the last 10 years of hostility. Ignore the assassination attempts. Ignore all of that. They want so badly for these people who hate them to like them. And Melanie Phillips points out, well, it seems like, and Lee Smith has made the same point, is J.D. Vance like some sort of plant working on Qatar's interests, who ultimately is going to get what Iran wants, and that's the United States out. Look at who Vance and Trump are talking to. This is J.D. Vance. Again, in the moment, he thinks this is a funny joke to make. And again, we joke around, we make comments. You've got to have a sense of humor, but there's a time and a place. He's talking about this deadly serious issue in the Middle East, and then notice what he makes a joke about. This is clip 4.
Now, I have seen some progressive criticisms of me personally saying, what experience does the Vice President of the United States have with hostile, high-stakes negotiations? And I would point those progressive critics to the fact that just 2 days ago, I spent over an hour on The View. So I actually have great experience in very hostile negotiations, and I've used that. I mean, look, Joy Behar is way tougher than the Iranians, and she and I are best friends now.
What? We need to bring back the Oprah clip if you want a sense of humor when she just does the what? Joy Behar, I mean, he's making a joke, is tougher than the Iranians, but they want so badly for the media to like them. I spent over an hour with The View. Why are you going on that show? Why do you care what they think? It's kind of like going back to Witkoff, and President Trump said, we sent him over there to deal with them. He doesn't have any experience doing it. He basically just read about it for 2 hours leading up to it, but he's a great guy because, well, he had a family crisis. And the leaders of Hamas, well, they lost their sons because the Jews killed them. So we could connect and relate on that level. I mean, that's essentially how J.D. Vance is talking right there. I can get in the ring with Joy Behar. I can get in the ring with the mullahs. Just childish leadership. Isaiah 3 leadership in the United States right now. Foolish leadership. This is President Trump talking about, well, now here's what he views as unconditional surrender. And note, he sits down to talk with Axios. I don't know that I've ever seen Trump officials reach out to the left-wing media as much as I have at any point in the last decade, as much as I have in the last 5 days. Axios, they were part of the election steal in 2020. They brought in the guys that were talking about the Red Mirage, and they were pushing all the propaganda, and President Trump is happy to sit down with them. And to the credit of Axios, to the credit of the left-wing reporter, they're asking really simple questions. Notice clip 1.
Well, by far, who else could have done a blockade like that? I did a naval blockade
where not one ship was able to get through. Some tried. They didn't, it didn't last very long.
And it certainly brought Iran to the table more than before. However, beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
I don't even know. What do you say? I mean, how do you deal with someone like that? Let alone dealing with the terrorists in Iran, sitting down with Axios, and he makes a good point there. Well, it brought them to the table, and it's like Mr. Hilliker said, it's like Mr. Fleury said, Trump, he wants the deal. And the attack was not for regime change, it wasn't for any of this, it was to push them to get to the table for a deal. Not to end the problem, it was to prolong the forever war. You still have the regime in power, and now they're going to be getting $300 billion. And President Trump and J.D. Vance, they're very careful to say, that's propaganda, it's not U.S. money. Nobody's saying it's U.S. money. Everybody's saying they're going to get $300 billion because you're unfreezing all of their cash. The sanctions are gone, and the money can start flowing back in so they can start selling oil again and funding the military machine. I think it was Shapiro who quoted or who mentioned, okay, well, the justification is we're giving them billions of dollars so they can rebuild. Rebuild what? We were very careful not to hit any civilian targets. Nobody does war the way the United States and Israel does war. So what are they going to get $300 billion to rebuild? And then you look at what's all of this for? Well, gas was over $4 a gallon. And Melanie Phillips, outside of the Trumpet, probably has some of the best commentary you're going to get on this. Maybe Melanie Phillips and Lee Smith. Melanie Phillips, her latest, Trump's surrender. Something darker is at work here than just a concern over rising fuel prices. Does Donald Trump actually understand what he's done? Responding to critics of his agreement with Iran, the U.S. president called them fools and either jealous or bad people because the stock market just hit a record high and oil prices are tumbling down. And if you don't agree, you're stupid. That's what Trump said. Phillips, so the economy is all that matters in a struggle to neutralize a fanatical Islamic revolutionary regime that puts its weapons where its mouth is when it screams, death to America. Iran has the will, but you look at the United States and its money, its midterms, it's the politics, and we've just let the whole world know it doesn't take a lot of leverage to push the United States around. Fire a few drones at some cargo ships, boost up the price of oil, because we can't tolerate just a little bit of struggle to have gas be over $4 a gallon for a few weeks. We don't want to jeopardize the investments from Qatar. I mean, it says a lot about the United States that that's such a huge concern. No spine for a war. And like Adi Taub said, this is a deluxe war. We're pretty much fighting it from a computer desk. And there's the pilots that are flying the missions, but most of it is being done from Washington, D.C., from huge aircraft carriers off the coast. Really not a huge price to pay to end a 47-year-long war. But there's just maybe a little bit too much struggle to see the gas prices go up that high. And that's what Melanie Phillips is pointing out. This just signaled to the world that the United States cannot tolerate gas being 50 cents more a gallon. It's humiliating. Well, here's the next clip. J.D. Vance I'll just play the clip. Clip 2.
I think the president's peace plan in Iran is already bearing real fruits for the American people. Last night, 12.5 million barrels of oil went through the Strait of Hormuz. That is a high since the beginning of the conflict. Oil prices are down nearly at their level from the pre-war conflict. Gas prices dropped below $4 a gallon today for the first time since the conflict. And importantly, they're going to keep falling further given how low oil prices are. On the military side, the Iranians, for the second night in a row, did not shoot at any ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So far, they are honoring their end of the commitment.
It's nauseating. It's nauseating. It's bearing real fruit. Gas prices dropped below $4 a gallon today. Again, it's a struggle, I suppose. But now the whole world knows if you want to get the United States out, there's pretty much, you could do anything you want. Anything that happens anywhere in the world will cause a little bump in gas prices, and that's enough leverage in a midterm, in an election year, to get the United States to back off. Bearing real fruits for the American people. It's hard to believe this is how we even approach a war. I mean, you can't please everybody. You can't go into it. You've got to go into it, well, what is the right thing to do? How do you finish this? You can't have 35, 40, 50, 100 different variables. Well, I got to please them. I want to make them happy. If the price goes above this, call the whole thing off. And really, as Melanie Phillips gets through, the analysts were saying this would be done, and Israel said it'll take a year. And you want to talk about trusting our allies, why not listen to the Israelis who actually are now confronting the evil instead of listening to, well, our Gulf Coast allies really like the deal. As if they have America's interest at heart. Again, look at how shallow our leadership is. I mean, it's to the point where Melanie Phillips is wondering what Melanie Phillips is saying, what is wrong with these people? Continuing from her article, he himself admitted that he stopped the war because of the threat of economic catastrophe if it continued. That was because of the oil shock caused by Iran seizing control of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump was therefore signaling that America was powerless to defeat the regime. At a stroke, he turned the United States into a paper tiger, seen to be unwilling to do what it takes to fight a war until victory. This could very well just be the end. J.D. Vance is getting his way, America first. Their warped view of what that actually means. And Trump did the hardest part. He confronted Iran and started bombing them. Actually, material damage of destroying facilities and weapons and bases. He actually attacked Iran, which is something the United States was unwilling to do for so many decades. And really, a lot of those other details, they'll sort themselves out. The whole world isn't just going to stop using oil because the Persian Gulf is closed. I mean, in many ways, if you waited a little bit longer, the world will adjust. It was part of his plan in going into Venezuela first. Let's get more oil. There's plenty of oil in the North Sea. Bring the regulations off. There's plenty of oil in the United States and Canada and Mexico. The rest of the world can come over here and get it. And then we're not held at the mercy of terror regimes who can close off the Persian Gulf like that. But President Trump just couldn't go a few more weeks, a few more months. Backed down. Melanie Phillips says, rather than ushering in an economic nirvana, Trump has given Iran the ability to take the world economy permanently hostage. After the Memorandum of Understanding's 60-day negotiation period, there's nothing to stop it from continuing its protection racket on the Strait of Hormuz by charging ships for selective safe transit. As U.S. intelligence agencies have concluded, Iran now retains the ability to close the strait whenever it chooses, leaving the Islamic Republic with the capacity to trigger significant economic disruption at any time. This is not close to unconditional surrender. But apparently President Trump thinks, well, this is now what unconditional surrender looks like. I mean, imagine that at the end of World War II, just leaving the Nazi Party in charge and then walking away and saying, we did it. Phillips says, what's so extraordinary is that the war Trump waged with Israel against the Islamic Republic clocked up unprecedented achievements. It liquidated Iran's leadership, decimated its missile armory, sank its navy, destroyed its air defenses, and put back the immediate nuclear threat it posed by several years. But now, he is putting all of that into reverse. Moreover, his statements over the past few days have been absolutely bizarre. Trump claimed that Iran must have missiles to some degree because others, like Saudi Arabia, had them. But Saudi Arabia isn't at war against America or Israel. Rather than firing at them as Iran has been doing, it's been assisting them against the Tehran warmongers. I guess in a sense, this is like what the United States does. Going back to World War II, I mean, they confronted the Nazi Party, it went underground, but then a couple years later, they were letting Germany, well, maybe not even a couple years, letting Germany denazify, letting the enemy take care of itself, as if that whole nation wasn't complicit in what the Nazi Party was doing. Melanie Phillips. The president's most disturbing comments, however, concerned Israel, America's close ally in the war. He accused the Jewish state of fighting for too long against Hezbollah in Lebanon and killing too many civilians in apartment blocks. He then suggested that Syria's president, Sharia, should handle Hezbollah instead if Israel can't do the job without killing everyone else. Phillips says these were monstrous comments. As in Gaza, Israel has gone to great lengths to target Hezbollah in precision attacks that minimize civilian casualties as far as possible. And Sharia, whom Trump seems to admire so much, is ISIS or Al-Qaeda in a suit. And we've already gotten a taste of how they wage war. Look back at those attacks on the Druze. President Trump says, oh, they'll go in there and they'll do a better job. You're right back to 2011 and the Syrian civil war and another refugee crisis and a terror group taking over again. Phillips says, Washington kept Israel out of the discussion leading up to the MOU, which so undermines Israel's security. Israel left out, but the Gulf Coast states really love it. At the same time, Trump was genuflecting to Iran's demand that Israel stop defending itself against the regime's proxy army, trying to wipe the Jewish state off the map. Trump signed the agreement because he found himself in a trap from which all escape options were bad. But that was because he had refused to accept Israel's assessment that the Tehran regime needed to be brought down and that it would take a year of attrition to do so. Ignore Israel, embrace Qatar, embrace the UAE. Again, not even that difficult from the United States perspective. Like Gadi Taub said, this is a deluxe war. A lot of Israelis have noted, well, this is actually a lot easier than we thought to confront the evil terror groups. Not land for peace, not trying to make a deal. We'll get to that in a bit because it's not like they've totally learned the lesson. But again, confronting the bad guys and really wiping them out. Everybody shows the pictures of Gaza as if this is just Israel just decided one day to go in there and do this. And that's the way Vance operates. That's the way Trump is operating. October 7, 2023, it's been blotted out. It didn't happen. Israel, they're committing genocide. Israel's provoking Hezbollah. If Israel can stop, then we can have a deal because we want to give the Iranians a chance because, well, they're changed. Or we want to at least see if they're changed, as if they haven't said that before. Phillips says, but the enormity of this capitulation to Iran, the ludicrous absurdity of his remarks, and the venom against his great ally, Netanyahu, suggest that something else is at work here. It was always assumed that Trump would be careful never to go down in history as a second Obama, replicating the former president's disastrous Iran deal. Nor would he ever tolerate being thought of as a sucker. And then later on, she goes on and explains how Qatar has got all this money that they're pledging to invest, and like Lee Smith said, is J.D. Vance, pushing this. And President Trump listens to all of these people. President Trump brings them in as advisors and won't stand up to them, I guess. Look at who is around President Trump influencing him. And you go back to that quote where he was sitting down with Mertz and he said, we want you to rearm, but not too much because, World War II, basically. So you wonder, well, is this, who's around him? Why is he so susceptible to what they say? And of course, his own pride and vanity, all of that warps the mind and blinds the mind. They're doing deals with terrorists. Like Mr. Fleury said, this is dangerous. This is how you get to Amos 7. And Jeroboam, King Jeroboam, President Trump, is his spiritual advisors. He listens to these evil people. Well, how does that happen? How do you get to that point? As Mr. Fleury says here in that article, don't accept gifts from terrorists. How could this happen? Referring to these prophecies in Amos 7. How will such a man get into leading President Trump spiritually? Where does this Amaziah come from? In Amos 7, he just suddenly appears. It doesn't say how he gets there. Mr. Fleury says, I will tell you how he gets there. He gets there because these people are cooperating with and caving in to terrorists. That kind of activity gives Satan an open door. We've got to take it a step above, take it to that spirit level. The Bible talks about a mind change in this king of the north. There's a lot of mind changes happening because of what they're dealing with. Mr. Fleury says, Trump's acceptance of that jet from Qatar is moving in this direction. The Qataris are giving an airplane to a man they know is vulnerable and is caving in. When you do things like this, Satan will not let you get away with it. There is no direct connection between the Qataris and this modern-day Amaziah, but the devil is behind them both. Trump has opened the door, and he is inviting satanic influence. That is what this is about. I mean, he's willing to work with terrorists. He's willing to work with the terrorists that perpetrated October 7th, 2023. Speaking of that Qatari jet, a listener emailed me that they were probably planning to use that on July 3rd. That's going to be the big inaugural flight, possibly flying over Mount Rushmore as the fireworks are going off to celebrate America's 250th birthday. I mean, what a scene to think about. Well, there's the jet that our terrorist friends in Qatar gave to us. Happy 250. Washington Post, White House says goodbye to an Air Force One as it prepares for Qatar jet. Basically, President Trump, and we've gone over this before, they ordered new planes. There's constant delays from Boeing. So Qatar gave this one to the Air Force, so it's not technically President Trump's plane. So that's how they avoid the bribe aspect of it. So President Trump is going to start using this jet now until the end of his term. It says the White House did not immediately comment on the transition, but the Air Force announced last month that the Qatari jet had completed modification and flight testing. While the exterior appearance of the jet is completely new, the Air Force did not modify the luxury interior, keeping the leather lounge areas designed for the Qatari royal family, instead of giving the plane the more office and workspace-oriented design of the current Air Force One. I mean, just the skeptic in me is like, well, did you search every little bit of that? I mean, I would be cutting open the cushions. I want to make sure there's nothing in there. But he likes the design, he likes the style. It says it was not immediately clear where Trump would travel on his first flight in the new plane. Well, I wouldn't want to use the plane. I wouldn't take the plane from the Qataris. But if I was going to that level, yeah, that thing's going to be taken apart, every nut and bolt, and then pieced back together. At any rate, not important. It was not immediately clear where Trump would travel on his first flight in the new plane. Trump is considering attending a fireworks display at Mount Rushmore in early July in celebration of the 250th anniversary of America's founding, but the trip has not yet been finalized, according to senior administration official. who probably is J.D. Vance. He seems to be always referred to as the administration official, and they don't just quote J.D. Vance. I don't understand why that keeps happening. At any rate, back to Melanie Phillips' article about Trump's surrender. She says, what if Trump's chronic narcissism makes him unable to see that's what he's actually become? We know from long experience that he often frames events to correspond with what he wants them to be rather than what they actually are. What if, accordingly, he really has turned surrender into victory against Iran in his mind? What if he really believes that America has won this war? There are possibly even darker explanations for this debacle. There are the financial connections between Iran's ally Qatar and people in the Trump administration, not to mention the $1 trillion that Qatar has now pledged to invest in the United States, in addition to the vast sums with which it has already bought up America. And Witkoff, he was in debt and he needed to offload this building. I think it was $600 million. Qatari group bought it. I mean, and look at all of these factors that go into, well, how they're dealing with Iran. And then this is J.D. Vance's reaction. Well, let's see if we can get them to change. This is clip 3.
I've seen skeptics of the deal. People say the Iranians will never change their behavior. Well, maybe that's true. And if so, they don't get any of the benefits of the bargain. But isn't it worth trying? Isn't it worth seeing whether this incredibly weakened position that the President of the United States has put the Iranians under, whether that motivates them to change their behavior, not just vis-a-vis the West, but vis-a-vis the Middle East?
It's been 50 years. 50 years, and this comes up over and again. This time is different. Obama tried to do it. This time will be different. It's the same regime. Maybe if we give them some cash and show them the Western way, they'll come around to it. Phillips says Israel now faces a hideous choice between abandoning its military defense against Hezbollah's unceasing attacks, and we'll go through the skirmish last night. The longtime opponents of this war may be gloating, but America's national interest demanded and still demands that the Iranian regime be neutralized. Iran's war against the West hasn't ended. Trump's surrender has produced a crisis, not just for Israel, but for America as well. Who has President Trump's ear? And you can see, just how easy it is to manipulate him. You use some flattering words, and you can get him to do something. It's pretty similar to the description in Daniel 8 about how that strong man gets in. He uses flattering words. And we have to consider this spiritual dimension at play. Look at Israel again, being hung out to dry, not a part of this detail, and basically is now the villain in Trump's eyes, getting in the way of the deal because of this parameter that's put in place that effectively says Hezbollah can just attack Israel, and if Israel responds, well, Israel's the aggressor, and Israel's the one that's ruining the deal. And Iran just has so many caveats carved into this thing. It's hard to believe President Trump could possibly, in any universe, make a comment that says this is what unconditional surrender looks like. Like I said, how do you deal, not with the Iranians, how do you deal with President Trump? Notice, again, a bit of this was in the cold open, but it's just more from J.D. Vance basically lashing out at Israel. This is clip 5.
Has the administration spoken to Bibi Netanyahu directly about the president's concerns recently, and what is the feedback from Israel?
Yeah, so we speak to Bibi or speak to somebody in the Israeli government, just as we speak to the Gulf Coast Coalition, our regional partners, pretty much every day, at least at some high level of our government. Look, the president's been very clear. He does not withdraw from Israel. No one could withdraw from another country the right of self-defense. Israel has the right to defend itself. But fundamentally, the Israelis, just like everybody else, have to respect this peace process that is fundamentally good for them and good for the entire region. What the president has grown frustrated sometimes is that we seem to be right on the cusp of a major breakthrough in the agreement, and then all of a sudden there's a major explosion that goes off in a civilian population center in Beirut, and a lot of people who have nothing to do with Hezbollah lose their lives. That's not acceptable. That's the sort of thing that we've asked for closer coordination so that we ensure it doesn't happen. And our message to the Israelis, just as our message to everybody else, is fundamentally, we want this peace process to be good for you.
I mean, that could be the Candace Owens podcast, Tucker Carlson, Glenn Greenwald. Well, the Israelis are bombing these population centers in Beirut indiscriminately, getting in the way of the deal. It's hard. Like I said, how do you deal with these people at this point? He said, but fundamentally, the Israelis, just like everybody else, have to respect this peace process that is fundamentally good for them and good for the entire region. It's a level of will worship to just tell them, this is good for you, you must do it. Ignore reality, ignore the rest of it. I don't even know how he can make a comment like that. They have to respect this. And it's good for them. Basically, giving them the poison and telling them, you're going to like it. And if you don't like it, well, you can have some more, I guess, or we're done with you. And then last night, I guess Vance was supposed to meet with more officials in Switzerland. Again, that's kind of been called off. It doesn't look like this deal's going to last long at all, but the damage is done. It's obvious now what the United States will give and will concede. And the rest of the world sees it. Germany, of course, sees it. Here's a montage just covering the attacks last night from Hezbollah, killing a pretty important leader in the IDF. And then Israel responding, and now this leading to basically this sit-down not happening in Switzerland. This is clip 11.
This is coming in from the Israel Defense Forces. It says, watch, a Hezbollah launcher firing rockets toward IDF soldiers in response to Hezbollah's repeated and blatant ceasefire violations. The IDF struck 2 Hezbollah command centers, 80-plus terror targets in southern Lebanon, and eliminated dozens of Hezbollah terrorists. The IDF also saying another blatant ceasefire violation as a result of an explosive drone impact in southern Lebanon. An IDF reserve officer was severely injured, and 3 reserve NCOs and an NCO were lightly injured. This incident follows numerous blatant ceasefire violations by Hezbollah. Just last night, 4 IDF soldiers fell in combat against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has showed time and time again it is not committed to the ceasefire, but to causing instability in the region.
What was supposed to be day one of this new 60-day negotiating period between the United States and Iran has turned into day nothing. Vice President J.D. Vance was supposed to be in Switzerland meeting today, but that trip has now been postponed, is what they're saying, with little explanation. A diplomat tells CNN that Iran is seeking guarantees that hostilities in Lebanon will end before it resumes talks with the U.S. And there was new violence overnight. Israel says 4 soldiers were killed in Lebanon when a Hezbollah explosive device struck a tank. Israel hit back, launching airstrikes that killed at least 18 people. That's according to Lebanon's health ministry.
It's crazy that is part of the deal, conditional on Israel not confronting Hezbollah. I don't even know how much, obviously, Hezbollah and Iran are aligned, and Iran funds them and pays for them. But you look at what's happened in Syria, I don't even know how Iran actually can continue to control Hezbollah. So you've got basically this terror group that doesn't totally answer to Iran the way that it used to. And you can see how every part of this deal is to hurt Israel. And President Trump and J.D. Vance agreed to it, said it was unconditional surrender. I mean, we're dealing with people who have the minds of beasts in Iran. They respect force. They answer to that. Oh, I've got another clip here from J.D. Vance again. Well, it was enough of that was in the opening montage, but he just talks about, well, I think it would be important to play this just because of the bit that he says here at the end. This is clip 6.
What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
As if Israel doesn't see it. And again, Israel isn't perfect either. None of these nations are turning to God. And you see how convoluted that makes things, how confusing it makes things. But look at just, again, how many prophecies we go through on this show that are lining up. The United States wants out. They're not mentioned in Daniel 11. They're attacked in Psalm 83. But then we talk about Israel turning to the Assyrian, turning to Germany in Hosea 5. You see where Israel we can't rely on the United States. Germany wants to do more. The United States is encouraging Europe to step up and rearm. Basically, you take care of your region. And then Israel looks to Germany. And the way Vance is talking there is, we'll cut you off, Israel. If you don't play ball, we'll consider cutting you off. And Israel, as we've covered on this show, has already got this backup plan. They work with Germany. They've got arms deals with Germany. You've got Germany wanting to step up and do more. And you've got the United States, you've got President Trump encouraging them to do that. I was going through the Nahum booklet the other day, and we talk about foreign policy blunders, and this is a big one. But the biggest one, as Mr. Gerald Fleury says in here, is about the United States trusting Germany. He says, but America, Britain, and Judah are going to become her lovers. Her is in the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire. Mr. Fleury says, we have a foreign policy that loves the Holy Roman Empire. It is going to be our biggest foreign policy debacle ever. Basically getting out and letting the beasts take over. I read those quotes or those articles a couple days ago. Fox News, Germany pledges to build Europe's strongest army as NATO allies answer Trump pressure. Germany's ambassador to the United States says, Germany is stepping up. We heard the call. New York Times, Germany and Japan are rearming again 80 years after World War II. Basically, we'll take over. We'll do what America is failing to do. As the Prime Minister in Luxembourg, I had a clip, was talking about how we need to sort out Ukraine and Russia. We can't rely on the United States to do these things. This one's from Al Monitor. Germany deploys ships to Red Sea for possible Hormuz mission, minister says. Germany is deploying 2 ships to the Red Sea in preparation for a possible military mission in the Strait of Hormuz, Germany's defense minister said. They're getting more involved there. And there's a lot of different prophecies that are coming to pass. And you look at the Trump administration, they're just a catalyst for all of these things. But Mr. Fleury says that foreign policy that loves the Holy Roman Empire is going to be our biggest foreign policy debacle ever. And it's kind of a quiet thing that nobody pays any attention to. Well, is actually encouraging Germany and Europe to become a military superpower and empire. And that is a foreign policy debacle. Again, as we point out on this show, it's all going to fail if you're not turning to God, if you're not considering and reasoning with God. These events, as terrifying as they are, they prove the accuracy of the Bible. It proves that the Bible is the most important book when it comes to understanding your world. We've mentioned just the articles at thetrumpet.com over the past few months since the Iran war started, back in February or March. That's the context that you need. And all of these events prove that it's leading up to the return of Jesus Christ. There's a lot of hope in watching all of these things happen, but you've got to respond. Respond the right way. You can request a copy of The King of the South. Mr. Stephen Flurry recorded a Key of David program offering this booklet that'll air next week, and all about this war with Iran and what Mr. Gerald Flurry has been saying over the past 35 years about this nation, about this conflict. Well, we'll transition over into WorldWatch. I hope you enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for joining us on the Trumpet Daily. As always, if you have comments or feedback, please send those to td@thetrumpet.com, and we will see you on Monday.
In a sign of heightened political turmoil, Germany experienced 85,837 politically motivated crimes last year. That is the highest ever, according to data from Germany's Interior Ministry released June 9th, up 2% from 2024, which jumped 40% from 2023. Politically motivated crime in Germany can mean anything from hate speech to assault. Most of the crimes were committed by right-wing and far-right perpetrators, but far-left actors were responsible for the largest increase in violent crimes, Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt said after presenting their report. These crimes rose 42% last year, largely related to protests against the far right. Data also shows that anti-Semitic crimes rose by 5%, while religiously motivated crimes increased by 5.7%. Bible prophecy predicts that these deep divisions within Germany will drive Germans to put their faith in a strong leader of an authoritarian government. To learn more, read our Trends article, Why the Trumpet Watches the Rise of a German Strongman. Israeli politicians on both sides of the aisle are recognizing the new U.S.-Iran peace deal as a catastrophe for Israel. The Memorandum of Understanding reportedly requires Israel to halt its war on Hezbollah in Lebanon, even though Israel is a sovereign nation and wasn't party to the agreement. Hezbollah is recognized as a foreign terrorist organization by the United States, and most of Lebanon's elected government opposes it. Members of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, such as National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have lambasted the deal. Defense Minister Israel Katz said the Israel Defense Forces would defy such requirements and stay in Lebanon indefinitely. Israel's media are also largely against the deal. Leaders of the IDF and Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, are united in their opposition. The U.S. and the State of Israel share a heritage tracing back to the biblical Kingdom of Israel. The two countries entered the Iran war as allies, but its fallout could drive them further apart than ever. To learn more, read The United States and Britain in Prophecy. Germany and Japan's wariness of America has resurfaced, the New York Times wrote on June 14th. It added that the two are strengthening ties and rushing to rebuild their militaries as China rises and Russia continues its aggression. Though Germany and Japan seem peace-loving democratic allies, the peaceful sentiment that prevailed after World War II has waned in recent years, the article noted. Japan today has the world's 10th largest military budget, despite its constitutional obligation not to maintain a military and to renounce war forever. Germany has the 4th largest military budget, despite having triggered the worst war in history, which killed 70 million people, and despite Allied leaders resolving in 1945 to destroy German militarism for all time. The Plain Truth, the Trumpet's predecessor magazine, consistently warned of this reversion to militarism and aggression. Bible prophecy shows where this wariness of America is leading. Germany will work together with an Asian power bloc, likely including Japan, to economically besiege the U.S. That siege will not only bring the U.S. to its knees, but also lead to the worst suffering ever in human history and an even more devastating world war. To learn more, read Isaiah's End-Time Vision. To learn more about current world news and how it relates to Bible prophecy, please visit thetrumpet.com.